What makes them swing states differs a little bit from place to place, but at the end of the day, the important thing is that they're all very competitive. 270 is the name of the game. So Georgia has 16 electoral votes, which makes it one of the larger states in the country. Look, Georgia has not been a swing state in sort of the modern 2000 and on election period. It wasn't until the 2020 election that Georgia really looked to be in play. It did still come a little bit as a surprise, given its electoral history, that it did go slightly, very slightly for Biden by about 0.2 of a percentage point. It was a lot about what was happening in the Atlanta metro area, which has about 60% of the votes in Georgia. If you're thinking about sort of the math on election night, Georgia, I think, is a particular must-win state for Trump as things have been shaping up here. So Arizona is another state that has become more competitive. First became a sort of a true swing state in the 2020 presidential election. When you're thinking about Arizona, so much of the vote, about 3 in 5 voters, are going to come from Maricopa County, which is where Phoenix is. So that makes Maricopa one of the largest counties in the country when it comes to the share of the vote it has, as you know, of the state it's in. In 2016, Trump carried Arizona by about 3.5 percentage points, and he carried Maricopa County by about 3 in doing that. Fast forward to 2020, and Joe Biden carried Maricopa County by a couple percentage points. Biden ended up carrying the state by just a bit less than 1 percentage point. Nevada has been a swing state for a while now. So in that sense, it's been of interest for a longer time than, say, Arizona or Georgia have. Now, Nevada is not as big as those places. It has 6 electoral votes, so it's actually the smallest of sort of these core 7 swing states that we're spending a lot of time talking about in this election. Biden did about the same in terms of his margin of victory as Clinton did. They both won by a little bit more than 2 percentage points in Nevada. However, this is while Biden was winning nationally by about 4.5 percentage points in terms of national popular vote. And so in that sense, Nevada was a little bluer compared to the nation as a whole in 2016 than it was in 2020. So in that sense, I think there's plenty of reason to think that Nevada could be even more competitive this time around. So Michigan has 15 electoral votes. It's a state that for a long time was sort of considered part of the quote-unquote blue wall with Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, which were these northern states where Democrats, not always by a lot, but tended to win at the presidential level. Michigan went Democratic in every presidential election from 1992 through 2012. And then in 2016, Trump very narrowly flipped Michigan. If you look at sort of how Barack Obama was doing, for instance, in 2008 and 2012 in Michigan, and then you look at how Clinton was doing in 2016, you see Clinton's margins get much worse in sort of the rural parts of the state and in communities that are mid-sized or smaller. And Biden did a little better than Clinton in most of these places. And that's how he was able to sort of take the state back, because it was so close in 2016. The conditions for Trump to potentially take the state back are absolutely there. If Harris can't build on some of what Biden did in 2020 and in other areas, the suburbs and exurbs where Trump improved. So Wisconsin has 10 electoral votes. And on election night, when you're watching the returns come in Wisconsin, there are sort of 2 core counties that you want to be looking at. And that's Dane County and Milwaukee. If you're thinking about the Democratic coalition, this is a place where turnout questions, especially among Black voters who have historically been very Democratic leaning, is a thing that could create trouble for the Harris campaign if turnout is not as strong there, or if Donald Trump is maybe cutting into the margins at least a little bit. In terms of who it is most must win for, Harris more so than Trump. North Carolina has 16 electoral votes, which is an increase from where it was in 2020. North Carolina is an interesting state. It's been competitive for a while now, but it has been consistently a little bit to the right of the country as a whole. Barack Obama very narrowly carried it in 2008, so it went for the Democrats. In 2012, it went back a couple points in the other direction and went for Mitt Romney by about 2 percentage points. And then Trump carried it by about 3.5 in 2016. In 2020, it was very tight again, and it was Trump winning it by a little more than a point. The fact that it's been slightly to the right of the country as a whole in recent elections means it's really a must-win for Trump in particular. So Pennsylvania is arguably the most important state in the Electoral College. Pennsylvania has 19 electoral votes, so it is the largest of sort of this core group of 7 swing states. You know, it was a pretty regular Democratic-leaning state for a long time. But what happened in 2016 is that Donald Trump made big gains outside of the major metropolitan areas. Donald Trump won it by less than a point in 2016, but Joe Biden narrowly carried in 2020. But for both candidates, I think the reason Pennsylvania ends up being sort of considered the most important state is that more often than any other state, Pennsylvania is the one that is most critical for somebody getting to 270 electoral votes or not. So what we call the tipping point state. Of all the swing states, it appears to be the one that is most necessary for both candidates.